Welcome to our conversation circle of the Afrikan Design Thinking Network. And the purpose being to convene and nurture a network, a community of practice of like-minded institutions of learning and development who are focused on design thinking, and particularly in the African context. So we intend to collaborate, to share ideas and resources, to build and mobilize and share knowledge, and to build capacity in design thinking or human-centered design on the continent. We're here to launch a call for African design thinking stories.
When we started meeting as a working group very early on, we started discussing, what's the best way to expose people to design thinking as a mindset, as a process, as a way to solve problems, as a way to approach complex challenges in the world around us. And we realized from our experience as a teaching design thinking or coaching design thinking that oftentimes the best way to do it is through, of course, storytelling.
We're looking for stories that will offer real-world examples of design thinking for teaching and learning purposes, so that we can make that teaching practical and relatable, and to help illustrate the various teaching points related to design thinking.
We want our students to be exposed to the types of challenges in our own contexts, in our own cultures, but we don't want to import these stories and then ask them to kind of abstract or translate that learning to another context. Why don't we tell the story within our own context, in our own voice and from our own, rooted in our own cultures?
There are so many examples, there's so many stories, but they're just not African. And so this is a real opportunity there. I think of it as how do we replace some of the great examples that we get, I hate to say Western, but other sources, examples from our backyard, because we encounter them all the time. I have so many examples of big surprises that came out of testing products in the work I've done, but are they written up? No.
Design thinking was used to get to a challenge, the mindsets, the tools, and values in the design thinking approach. And some stories might tick several boxes. It might be all of those. Like we discussed a number of learning points now from the Lion Lights example. We could use one story that shows lots of different aspects of design thinking. So we might show stories that provide evidence of the benefits and value of design thinking, but we can also show the limitations and the challenges. We could include stories of success and even failure, so we can show where design went wrong, or where it wasn't done well, or where our biases interfered and we didn't see the unintended consequences, or so on. So we want to extract lessons. So it doesn't just have to be stories of success. And then from all of these, we really hope to derive lessons from these stories that show how design thinking has been adapted for the local context, or even that drew on local traditions of collaborative, creative problem solving. How do young people get together and come up with ideas? How do elders sit around the fire and talk about a challenge that they're going to tackle? We want to draw on. We really want to tell the story of design thinking in Africa. It's time for us to tell our story, and we need your help. We want to hear stories of design thinking that has been used and applied in Africa by Africans for Africans. We want it to be really accessible and inclusive. And we might even have stories that can be told in a really simple form. So how people are using stories is, in a 3-day design thinking workshop, they're quickly showing a 3-minute video and then discussing that. And that can be the kind of story we are referring to here. And then there are those who are doing much longer, more advanced training. And that same story, we might then develop into a more elaborate teaching case with some written text accompanying it and reference to online materials and further reading and papers and so on. So we're seeing this in various versions and for a diverse range of audiences. The D-School Africa, who's driving this with funding of the Hasso-Plattner Foundation and in collaboration with our other partners in the working group, would be the kind of editorial of this, and it would be a collection that would be shared and disseminated as an open resource, sort of Creative Commons manner, to be used by others. So we would then put out the story. There would be a compilation of the story in a multimedia way, and then accompanied by teaching points and perhaps facilitation guidelines for coaching. You know, how can you ask your students what teaching points does this convey? When can you use this in your teaching toolkits, etc.? We recognize the stories are out there. Maybe people are using them already. Maybe you're teaching a story that you know of, or maybe there's a story of a project you were involved with yourself that can offer a good example. How to tell your story. We've developed an online form, and there's two kind of pathways in it. Well, one is you just have a broad idea, and you just want to give us brief information, and then we can contact you. We're putting together a research and writing team that are going to be helping to looking at what's submitted, verifying the story, finding out more, looking what media exists that can be used, developing the teaching points, etc. So someone in the team will then contact you to explore the story further in conversation. Or you might have lots of details to share. And then the Google form basically covers a broad description, the context in which it took place, the people involved, what aspects of design thinking you think the story conveys, why it's a good teaching story, how it shows how design thinking was adapted, if applicable, and then any materials and media that can be shared or uploaded. If you have a story in mind that you might want to share, so as we go through the form, think about how would I answer that question. Let's follow the example. This is our Google form. If you have more information, there is a template to guide you. So I went back now to those options. So you can either then choose, you have a story that you were directly involved with, right? So this was a project you worked on and you used design thinking, and this is the story. Or you know of a story that is or could be used for teaching design thinking. So you know about it indirectly. It's not your story, but you're teaching with it and you can share what you know. So both of those options will take you to the set of questions. So this is where you have options for submitting the story. So you just have a broad idea. You don't have a lot of detail. You can select this, okay? And I'm going to show you what happens if you do that. Then you're just asked to answer these questions. Provide a brief description of the story. What is your reasoning and inspiration for why you think this story could support teaching and design thinking in Africa? Do you have anything else to add? So maybe you have a link. So then I can go www.lionlights. If you have any files, so you might have images, you might have slides that you've used, anything that you might have, you can upload a file and you submit. Now, here's when we ask you about design thinking. So why do you consider this story to be useful to support the teaching of design thinking? What are the messages in it? What are the aspects of design thinking that the story conveys? Okay, so here's just the rest of this text is just to, you may want to draw on these points. It's just to guide your response, a particular framing you might offer. So it demonstrates how design thinking was used to solve a challenge or improve a solution. Or it might demonstrate various mindsets of design thinking, all right? Or perhaps it talks to the stages of design thinking. And we've just put this out here to jog your thinking, and there might be others. You don't have to stick to these, but this offers some framing for what you could point to about your story. All right, so it's just an idea. We're not asking you to write a teaching case. Our team will do that work, but we'd love to hear, what do you see in it? And for those who find the form like a lot of work or in any way overwhelming, we'll work together. The writing and creation process happens together after the form. The form is just the beginning of the conversation.